Ever wondered how medieval peasants survived the brutal Little Ice Age winters that lasted from 1300 to 1700, when rivers froze solid for 70 days and 18 feet of snow buried entire towns? While wealthy nobles died in their drafty castles, clever peasants developed survival strategies so effective they thrived in conditions that would challenge modern survival experts with all their gear. Heated stones. Medieval peasants discovered the ultimate portable heating system that required no electricity or fuel costs. They heated stones or bricks in the fireplace, then carried them carefully, wrapped in fabric, to their beds to warm the sheets. These bed warmers retained heat for hours, turning freezing sleeping areas into cozy refuges. Peasants strategically placed multiple heated stones throughout their homes, creating warming stations that lasted through brutal nights when temperatures plummeted below survival levels. Animal sheltering. Smart peasants realized their livestock weren't just food sources, they were living heaters that could mean the difference between life and death. Families brought pigs, goats, and chickens directly into their homes during extreme cold, creating shared warmth that benefited both humans and animals. Those who had cows, pigs, sheep, and other animals still had to feed and care for them, even during winter. But clever peasants housed animals in attached sections where body heat from large livestock could warm entire cottages, while protecting valuable breeding stock from freezing. Pig processing. December wasn't just cold, it was strategic slaughter time that provided months of survival nutrition during the deadliest season. Peasants were busy slaughtering, butchering, and cooking the pigs that had been feeding on acorns. On the November page, now fattened, the animals were ready to be killed and processed to sustain the family for the cold months to come. This wasn't random killing, it was calculated timing. Only the pigs that had gained sufficient weight were slaughtered in the winter. The entire community participated in this life-saving process, with families sharing labor and expertise too. Maximize meat preservation through salt curing and smoking techniques. Fire management. Medieval peasants turned firemaking into a survival science that went far beyond simple wood burning. The fireplace did not always suffice to heat peasant houses. Some were equipped with portable braziers. These weren't luxury items, they were essential survival tools that peasants moved strategically throughout their homes to create heat zones. However, these were quite the safety hazard and were involved in a number of house fires and disastrous incidents. Smart peasants developed rotation systems where family members took turns maintaining fires throughout the night, ensuring continuous warmth while preventing deadly carbon monoxide poisoning. They learned to burn specific wood types that produced maximum heat with minimal smoke, and created fire management schedules that conserved precious fuel while maintaining life-sustaining temperatures during the coldest months, when a single night without heat could kill. Clothing layers. Medieval peasants developed sophisticated layering systems that rivaled modern thermal clothing, using materials they could obtain for free or very cheaply. People wore extra warm clothes inside and, when possible, stayed by the fire. Woolen coats, scarves, and mittens were common, but they went beyond basic wool. Some lined their winter clothes with fur. Although fur is often associated with luxury clothing, peasants are believed to have lined their winter clothes with rabbit and lamb. This wasn't about fashion, it was about survival engineering. Peasants could collect the pelts of the small game their lord allowed them to catch and process them to make warmer clothes. They understood that air trapped between layers provided insulation, so they wore multiple thin layers rather than single thick garments. Even sleep required strategic clothing. Medieval peasants slept with a nightcap. These weren't just hats, were essential gear that prevented deadly heat loss through the head during freezing nights. Food stockpiling. Winter survival depended on strategic food preservation that began months before the first snowfall, transforming summer abundance into winter life insurance. Charcuterie and cured meats, such as salted ham, were staple foods. In the medieval diet, blood sausage or black pudding, made from pig blood, were poor people's food, fairly common for the medieval peasants. These weren't delicacies, they were survival rations that could last months without spoiling. Peasants understood that nothing could be wasted during slaughter season. Every part of animals became preserved food. Blood became sausages, organs became PTS, fat became cooking lard, and bones became soup stock. But preservation extended beyond meat. Families stockpiled root vegetables in underground cellars, dried herbs and fruits during summer months, and preserved dairy products using salt and fermentation techniques. The most successful peasant families began their winter preparations. In early autumn, calculating exactly how much preserved food would be needed to survive until spring crops became available. Communities shared preservation, knowledge, and resources with families specializing in different preservation methods, then trading surplus preserved foods to ensure everyone had diverse nutrition during the killing season. Building ceiling medieval houses were poorly insulated and subject to constant cold drafts. But clever peasants fought back with ingenious sealing techniques. Windows were rarely equipped with glass. Most people sealed their walls' openings. With paper, only a few could afford expensive glass windows. Peasants stuffed cracks with straw, mud, and animal hair, creating primitive but effective insulation. They hung heavy fabrics over doorways and moved entire families into single rooms during the coldest months, maintaining life-sustaining temperatures using minimal fuel resources. Community survival. Medieval winter survival wasn't an individual effort. It was a community-wide strategy where shared resources and collective knowledge meant the difference between villages that thrived and those that died during brutal seasons. Slaughtering and processing the pigs was a collective work that required a lot of different tasks and steps, from collecting the pig's blood to processing the entrails and carcass. This community cooperation extended beyond butchering into every aspect of winter survival. Families shared heating responsibilities, with neighbors taking turns maintaining fires in common areas, sharing fuel resources, and rotating night watches to ensure no one froze while sleeping. Villages developed elaborate sharing systems where families with excess preserved food traded with those who had surplus firewood, tools, or skilled labor. During extreme weather events, entire communities moved into the largest, best-heated buildings, essentially creating temporary survival communes that pooled body heat, food resources, and fuel supplies. The most successful medieval villages established mutual aid networks where no family faced winter alone. These weren't just social customs, they were engineered survival systems that recognized individual families might fail, but coordinated communities could survive conditions that killed isolated settlements. Archaeological evidence shows villages with strong cooperation networks had significantly higher survival rates during the worst Little Ice Age winters. Winter farming. While modern people assume farming stops in winter, medieval peasants continued strategic agricultural work that was essential for both immediate survival and next year's food security. The beginning of winter, up to Christmas, corresponded to the planting of winter crops in the fields that had laid fallow the previous season. In England, winter crops were usually wheat, although some sowed barley. This wasn't optional. It was survival planning that required working in brutal conditions. The crops germinated before the cold set in and would, hopefully, swiftly grow once spring came. But winter farming involved much more than planting. Peasants spread manure to fertilize their fields. They harvested cabbages and leeks. They planted new vines and pruned their older ones. They cut and pruned their trees. These activities weren't just agricultural maintenance, they were survival strategies that provided fresh food during months when preserved supplies might run low. Cutting and pruning provided essential firewood, while harvesting winter vegetables supplied crucial vitamins that prevented scurvy and other deadly nutritional diseases. Repair work on the buildings, fences, and tools, as well as harvesting firewood, punctuated the daily life of peasants. Smart peasants understood that winter work, despite the brutal conditions, was an investment in survival. Every day spent maintaining tools, repairing shelters, and gathering fuel was insurance against the deadly emergencies that could strike during the coldest months, when any equipment failure could mean death. Emergency protocols. Medieval peasants developed sophisticated emergency response systems for surviving the extreme weather events that could kill entire communities within days during the Little Ice Age. During the 1389 winter, the Chronicle of the Mediterranean city of Montpellier reports dramatic snowfalls in the region of Lozère, where occasional snowfall were, and still are, relatively common. That year, wrote the scribe, in January, February, and March, the snowfalls in Lozère were so great that they destroyed many farmsteads and that many people died because their houses fell down on them. Other people died of cold, others of hunger, because snowfalls had lasted so much longer than usual that people had run out of provisions. Learning from such disasters, successful peasant communities created emergency protocols that could save lives when normal survival strategies failed. Villages established emergency food caches hidden in multiple locations, ensuring that even if homes were destroyed, survival supplies remained accessible. They developed building techniques that could shed heavy snow loads and created emergency shelter protocols where entire communities could survive in the strongest structures during catastrophic weather. Peasants learned to read weather signs that predicted extreme events, allowing them to implement emergency measures before conditions became deadly. They maintained emergency fuel supplies that were never touched except during true survival situations, and created communication systems using bells, fires, and other signals that could coordinate community response even when travel was impossible. The most prepared villages had detailed plans for who would be responsible for different emergency tasks, ensuring that even during panic situations, essential survival activities continued efficiently. In snow, as just an obstacle, medieval peasants discovered ways to turn winter's deadliest weapon into a survival tool that could provide insulation, water, and even food preservation during the harshest months. Archaeological evidence shows peasants built snow walls around their homes, creating windbreaks that reduced heat loss and provided additional insulation for poorly constructed buildings. They learned that fresh snow contained trapped air that made it an excellent insulator, and piled it strategically against walls and roofs to create thermal barriers that could raise internal temperatures by several crucial degrees. Snow also solved the water access problem during months when wells froze and streams became impassable. In Bologna, 18 feet of snow had reportedly fallen, and even more snow covered the city of Modena. Instead of seeing this as purely catastrophic, survivors learned to harvest and melt snow efficiently, creating water supplies that lasted through extended freezing periods. Peasants developed snow melting techniques that maximized fuel efficiency, using minimal firewood to convert snow into drinking and cooking water. They even used snow for food preservation, creating natural refrigeration systems that kept meat and other perishables fresh during months when normal preservation methods might fail. The most ingenious peasants created snow caves and storage systems that provided emergency shelter when their homes became uninhabitable. Understanding that properly constructed snow shelters could maintain temperatures above freezing even when outside air reached deadly cold levels. Some communities became so skilled at snow utilization that they could maintain normal activities even during the extreme snowfall events that trapped other villages for months, turning environmental disasters into manageable survival challenges through superior understanding of snow's properties. Survival psychology, the mental strategies medieval peasants used to survive months of brutal cold, limited food, and constant death threats were just as important as their physical survival techniques, creating psychological resilience that enabled communities to maintain hope and cooperation during conditions that drove others to despair and death. Historical records show that villages with strong social structures and shared cultural practices had dramatically higher survival rates during extreme winters, proving that mental survival strategies were literally life-saving technologies. Peasants developed winter entertainment and social activities that maintained community bonds during months when isolation could lead to deadly depression and conflict. Some illuminators took a different route and represented playful winter scenes. The Sea. 1460 Hours of the Duchess of Burgundy features a lovely snowball fight set in a city, where grown-ups and children are hard at play. These weren't just idle recreation, they were psychological survival strategies that maintained morale and community cooperation. Other winter pleasures and leisures depicted in manuscripts include ice skating on bone, or later, iron skates. Peasants understood that maintaining hope and social connections was essential for surviving months of hardship that could break the human spirit as easily as the cold could kill the body. They created storytelling traditions, shared craft activities, and cooperative work projects that gave people purpose and community connection during the darkest months. Villages developed religious and cultural practices specifically designed to provide psychological comfort during winter, creating shared experiences that reminded people they weren't facing survival challenges alone. The most successful peasant communities treated mental health as seriously as physical survival. Understanding that communities could have adequate food and shelter, but still die if they lost the psychological resilience needed to endure months of brutal hardship while maintaining the cooperation that made group survival possible. These medieval peasants weren't just enduring winter, they were mastering survival conditions that killed thousands during the Little Ice Age, when entire communities were trapped under snow for months. While we panic about power outages and heating bills, they thrived through ice ages, using systems that required no technology, just intelligence and community cooperation. The most shocking part, many of these winter survival techniques work better than modern heating systems and cost absolutely nothing to implement. You could start using medieval heated stone warming, emergency shelter sealing, and community survival strategies immediately during the next winter storm. Using these methods reports staying warm in sub-zero temperatures without any modern equipment. Want to master these medieval winter survival secrets that saved lives during history's coldest period? Subscribe for our complete guide to Little Ice Age survival strategies that actually work when modern systems fail. Don't let winter weather control your life when centuries of proven survival wisdom is waiting to transform your cold weather preparedness forever.